How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Some idea.
I am not completely like other people.
What do you mean by that?
People dislike me because I am not completely like them. I am trying to do with my life something which few people try to do, and this influences my thinking and consequently my action.
What is it you're trying to do with your life?
Play the piano for people.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.
is the end. There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? Oh, I'm burning in the stone. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the stone. This is the final time. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in the stone. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the stone. This is the final
What up, everyone? I am sorry for being late. This actually wasn't my fault this time. This is not one of those occasions where I was just working on something that I looked up and it was 5:15. I actually had to restart my computer like several times because I needed to update a plugin to be able to do a spy stream later today. So I was late in service of all of you because in a couple of hours, we are going to be doing spy stream. We are going to be going inside a live leftist training. It's going to be a rare public spy stream. Yeah, exactly, Chris. Time isn't real anyway, so I don't know what you're all complaining about. So we are going to be doing a spy stream later. I had to install a plugin in order to get the plugin to work. I had to restart my computer several times. That's why I'm late. It's not my fault. Now you can all hear the spy stream. I'm sorry, but, it was for the greater good. It was for the greater good. So let's just jump right into it, guys. We do have a couple things today. Now, we are going to be going and watching some of our favorite communists, the Denver communists today. We love the Denver communists because the Denver communists create a lot of content and they put all their content online. And it's actually really good content most of the time. If you want to learn about the left and you want to learn what the left believes, the Denver communists are actually a pretty good place to start because oftentimes they speak in very plain language so that normal people can understand it. And they're not shy about their crazy ideas. They say the crazy ideas in normal language. So we love the Denver communists for that reason. They've got a couple new presentations up on their YouTube channel, which they do update very regularly. The one I want to watch today is called Why We Need to Build the Revolutionary Party Now. I think that's probably the most relevant. Well, the Denver communists basically run Firebrand. So that's why they look a lot alike, because the Denver communists are the Firebrand Collective and the Firebrand Collective is the Denver communists. The Firebrand Collective is just a broader organization that they're doing to be like unofficially affiliated with other communist and socialist groups all over the country. And so anytime if you see similar content on the Firebrand Collective and the Denver Communists, there's a reason for that. The Denver Communists were the ones that started the Firebrand Collective. So that is what we're going to watch today, guys. There are other great videos on their channel too. We will watch some other stuff if we have time, but I've got a couple quick things. I've got a couple announcements, a couple things I want to say before we get into that. I hope you will all humor me. Number one, I mentioned this, but the reason that I was a little bit late today is I had to make sure that I had the technology correct to do spy stream later today, because we are doing a rare public spy stream. And actually, the public spy stream might turn out to be weekly or bi-weekly thing, because the National Education Association, which is the largest teachers union in the country, is just being very open and very blatant about their organizing. And I don't think that I need to hide from them that I'm streaming their meetings live on my YouTube channel. With a lot of these organizations that we do spy stream for, and spy stream, if people don't know, is when we go inside a live leftist training, we watch it like as it's happening to see what they say when they think people like us aren't listening. A lot of leftist groups don't like when I do this, because then I record their content and I release it and I make them look dumb. But the National Education Association doesn't really seem to care, because they're having these huge organizing calls all the time where, I mean, obviously, like, they don't know what name I'm signed up under. They don't know what name I'm streaming under. They don't know any of these things. And so I don't think they care if we stream their meetings publicly. So I just thought maybe I'll just start streaming all their meetings publicly. Maybe just to show people what the teachers union, the largest teachers union in the country, the people who are teaching your kids in K through 12 schools, I just think people might like to know what they're actually talking about behind closed doors. And so they do actually have one later today. We're going to start streaming it in about 2 hours and 15 minutes. We're going to start about 7:45 tonight. It starts at 8 o'clock. It's called Public Education Should Be Bipartisan, a virtual town hall for GOP public education allies. So the National Education Association is basically trying to woo people from the right over to their team to defy the Trump administration. And I want to know what they're saying, and I want to know what right-wingers they're working with, and I want people to see that. So we're going to be watching that a little bit later today. This is going to be a spy stream that's going to come up on the channel. You'll see it here. Teachers Union organizing call to woo the right to defy Trump. That is going to start around 7:45 p.m. tonight. I do hope you can make it. If you can't make it to that spy stream, then hopefully you can make it to a spy stream in the future. Spy stream is one of those things where sometimes we can watch the news be made like literally right in front of us, where you might see a viral clip happen like in real time, and then a day or two later that clip goes viral on Twitter. That has happened many times with spy stream. Of course, we don't actually know what they're going to say because it is a live presentation. We have no idea. It might be a completely milquetoast presentation where nothing really crazy happens, or you might hear some of the craziest things you've ever heard in your life. It really could go either way. We have had a couple viral clips, specifically from the NEA calls, go viral lately. We got, if you guys missed it, you can always find this over on my Substack. We got, let's see. We got a whole bunch of stuff to go viral lately from these NEA calls specifically, to include, this one is the one I was looking for. We got the vice president of the Chicago Teachers Union on video calling to shut shit down, organizing protests openly to get teachers to leave the classroom to go into the streets and protest. We got him on video talking about abolishing the Constitution, overthrowing democracy, things like that. That's literally the clip. You can find this on my Substack right now. Andy No shared this out on Twitter, so it did get actually quite a bit of reach. So these are the types of things that can happen literally on these spy streams, is you don't know what people are going to say. And sometimes leftist activists are really emboldened on these spy streams because they want to show off a little bit for their friends, and they're very inclined to say the quiet part out loud. So we will be streaming it at 8 p.m. tonight, 7:45, 8 p.m. tonight. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Make sure you come back for that. It's going to be a wild ride. Please make sure also that you are subscribed to my Substack. This is the best place to subscribe if you want news and updates, especially other spy streams we do, because most spy streams are actually supporter-only spy streams, like the one we did on Monday. On Monday, we went inside a librarian training call in which a gender and sexuality librarian at the University of Michigan openly said that the librarians and the faculty were organizing at the University of Michigan to defy the Trump executive orders. They openly talked about working with the students. They openly talked about getting the students to organize with them. And this was on a call on Monday. And so we spy streamed that on Monday. And also, wouldn't you know it? I talked about this on the stream, but I just want people to understand this. This might seem like a wonky thing that I zoned in on the University of Michigan specifically, but there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, I actually have people in my community who work at the University of Michigan and are pretty connected within the University of Michigan community. So I actually get a lot of gossip about things that are going on at the University of Michigan. One of the things that's going on there is that the president of the university is leaving to go become the president at the University of Florida. And when I found out that Santa Ono was leaving the presidency at the University of Michigan, I wasn't surprised at all, because I've been hearing for a while that Santa Ono is miserable being president. The faculty won't work for him. He's not really doing anything. He just wants to get out of there. He's basically just going through the motions. And so I wasn't at all surprised to hear that Santa Ono was going to the University of Florida. But what I was surprised about was that Christopher Rufo, for no apparent reason, tweeted that Santa Ono had he had eliminated DEI at the University of Michigan. And I was like, that's not true. That's not true at all in any way. And now Rufo might say, oh, no, I didn't say he eliminated DEI. I just said he eliminated the centralized DEI. I'm sorry, why does that matter? Is Chris Rufo saying that he's okay with DEI existing on publicly funded college campuses as long as there's no centralized DEI office? That seems a little suspect to me. And so I was like, why the ever-loving F is Christopher Rufo running cover for Santa Ono, trying to make people think that Santa Ono eliminated DEI at the University of Michigan, when I know for an absolute fact he did not eliminate DEI at the University of Michigan. And one of the reasons he's leaving the University of Michigan is he couldn't get the faculty to do anything, and he was miserable as a result of it. And that's why he's going to the University of Florida, because he just wanted to get the F out of there before the shit started really hitting the fan, because the faculty at the University of Michigan are completely rebelling against everything. I know this for a fact. I have people in my community working at that school. And so we got a clip on Monday, literally on Monday, and you can find this on my Twitter. You can also find it on the Substack, of a librarian at the University of Michigan, a gender and sexuality librarian, that is this woman's title, talking about organizing to do DEI, organizing to resist the Trump administration. The librarians are using unions to organize with the faculty unions to resist the Trump administration. They're recruiting the students to organize with them. It's all very, 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 very clear what's happening. And so the reason I bring this up is not that I have any particular ill will towards Christopher Rufo specifically, because I think he's done a lot of good work in the past. But the reason I bring this up is, why is he trying to convince the public that Santa Ono eliminated DEI at the University of Michigan, when that obviously and clearly did not happen, based on the primary source evidence from 2 effing days ago, Chris? These are the types of things we find on SpyStream. We listen to the boots on the ground activists to find out what's really going on, what's really being said, so that when we have narrative shillery coming out in the public from conservative influencers who are trying to convince people, we're winning, DEI is dead, we're winning, we can say, oh yeah? Then why do I have this recording, Chris? If you're winning and Santa Ono eliminated DEI at the University of Michigan, then why do I have this recording from 2 effing days ago? This is the benefit that SpyStream gives us. We get insight into these organizations that no one else has. We get to actually ask the question, are we actually winning, or are we just pretending we're winning because it looks good on Twitter for clout? Because for my money, and this is why I always get in trouble with conservative influencers like to put shit out there all the time saying, we're winning. Give me money, give me support. We're winning. I have this crazy idea that in order to actually defeat the left, we need to hinge into reality and directly confront the problem in front of us. And if we are unwilling to tell the truth about what's going on because we want to do narrative shilling to make everyone think we're winning when we're not, that's a great way for the left to win. This is what happened when all this talk about critical race theory in schools happened a couple years ago. Do you guys remember this? The big talk a couple years ago for months was critical race theory in schools, critical race theory in schools, critical race theory in schools, critical race theory in schools. That was all that was being covered on the news. That was all they were talking about. They were trying to do these anti-CRT bans all over the country. And Then they started passing laws, quote unquote, banning critical race theory in schools. And then Florida passed the Stop Woke Act, which they swore up and down banned all this woke bullshit in schools. And then everyone on the right was happy and they went, we're winning, we're winning, we're winning. And then the news media stopped covering critical race theory in schools. Did critical race theory ever go away in schools? No. Did critical race theory ever go away in schools and in states where it's allegedly banned? No. And I know that because I live in the state of New Hampshire, which was one of the first states to pass that anti-CRT ban. And I know for absolute certain that it is still being taught in New Hampshire schools today. I know that because I reported it to the state, and the state said, we're not going to do anything about that. So the states aren't even enforcing their own laws. I know for a fact this is going on in Texas too. We see stories all the time coming out in Texas of the conservative states with these anti-CRT bans that they allegedly passed to say, we're winning, we're winning. And then they don't fucking enforce the law. And then no one in the news media covers it. So everyone thinks it went away. I just saw Tim Pool the other day say, oh, we've turned the tide on this. No one's teaching critical race theory anymore. Really? Do you want me to give you an example from like less than a week ago of a school in a so-called red state teaching critical race theory? Because I promise you, it really wouldn't be that hard to find. It happens all the time. The problem is that conservative media no longer covers it. So their audience just doesn't think about it anymore because it's not being talked about by their favorite influencer on Fox News. And so everyone just assumes it's gone away when it hasn't. And the problem persists. The same thing with gender ideology. So funny thing happened earlier. Funny thing, not that, not that, not that. This. Same thing with gender ideology. Funny thing happened. A funny thing flew into my inbox earlier today. Because one of the socialist organizations I monitor actually very closely is an organization called Rethinking Schools. Rethinking Schools are a bunch of socialist teacher trainers. They actually do teacher training at public schools all over the country. They also work with the Zinn Education Project. There are a couple other organizations they're involved with. But I just want to read you guys this email. You guys, because you guys know, if you listen to the Trump administration and you listen to the conservative influencers and you listen, we just heard Tim Pool say this like 2 days ago. Tim Pool was like, gender ideology is not even being taught in schools anymore. Oh, yeah? Oh, really? Then why did I get this email today? Let's read. The Trump administration moved with lightning speed to erase trans students and educators' LGBTQ history and literature from our schools. As social justice educators, we need to fight against this repression. Transgender justice in schools is an urgent tool to express solidarity with trans people. As Bettina Love is an avowed socialist, wrote, this book's relevance is undeniable in light of the ongoing assaults on trans youth. It serves as a vital guide towards education justice. They're promoting a book called Transgender Justice in Schools. I think it's pretty explicit. We need your help to launch transgender justice in schools study groups across the United States. Using the Rethinking Schools book, Transgender Justice in Schools, educators will explore how to teach LGBTQ issues and support trans students in free, educator-led, professional learning communities. Please make a tax-deductible gift today. So Rethinking Schools, socialist teacher training organization, is raising tax-deductible donations as part of a 501c3 nonprofit in order to buy their own books and distribute their own books about teaching trans and gender bullshit in schools to teachers in unofficial study groups that they're setting up outside of the schools. They're raising tax-deductible donations to do it. And let's just read the second part of this email. Too often, fear stops teachers from making choices to include the queer community in our curriculum. Our book provides personal narratives, lesson plans, and resources to equip educators, parents, and students with the tools to imagine and organize towards a new possible world that are free from violence, transphobia, towards the magic of queer futurity, says Colorado professor Jose after reading the book. Please make your tax-deductible donation today. You're telling me that gender stuff isn't taught in schools anymore? Do you want me to show you the teacher study groups where the far left teacher activists are training the teachers outside the school using tax-deductible donations through a 501c3, where they are literally teaching them how to do this? You think that gender issues aren't going to be taught in schools anymore when they're doing stuff like this? I don't. I don't buy it. But will anything be done about this? Nah, probably not. Probably not, because that's the world we live in. Probably not. Anyway, this is the type of stuff you get with my content, guys. If you appreciate the work I do monitoring the real far left so that you know what's actually going on. And by the way, you never have to take my word for anything, because I provide you with primary source evidence to support every single thing that I say. So I will never come to you and say, pinky swear, trust me, bro. I swear this is happening. I swear we're winning. We're winning. Trust me, we're winning. Just go back to sleep. Just don't worry about it. Just know that we're winning and you should give me money because we're winning, and don't worry about anything else. I will never do that shit. I will give you primary source receipts directly from the source every single time, whether they be video or emails that they're sending out, or websites they're creating, or documents they've written, or audio recordings of their events. You will always have the primary source material in full context so that you can see verifiably every single thing I'm saying is happening in the real world. That's what you get when you support my work on my Substack. That is Karlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. I am 100% completely funded by you. If you appreciate the work I'm doing, please sign up for a membership of $8 a month, $80 a year. That gets you access to all of our supporter exclusive spy streams. It gets you access to my supporter Discord, where we do movie nights on Sundays and Mondays. It gets you access to community Zoom that I do on Monday that's private, that's unrecorded. It gets you other supporter perks as well. And of course, you keep getting this content because I'm the only person doing this content on the internet. I have ostracized myself from the conservative right because of this content, because so much of my content disproves the narrative that they're trying to sell people. So if you want to know what's really going on, and by the way, the left doesn't like me either because I expose them. I'm the only person doing this from a completely nonpartisan perspective. I don't care what tribe you're on. I don't care what your politics are. If you want to see what the far left is doing, I will show you what the far left is doing. And all I ask in return is that if you appreciate the work I'm doing, please support it, because I cannot do this work without your support. So I would appreciate that. All right, guys, we are going to be getting into the Denver Communists in just one quick second. I do have one more thing I want to say. I have a James Lindsay update. And so please just humor me for a moment and allow me to do the James Lindsay update. Because last night, James Lindsay's stepdaughter started tweeting again. And listen, I know James Lindsay's stepdaughter. She goes by Britta Bongwater on Twitter. She also has another account on Twitter that people don't know about. But I actually do know James Lindsay's stepdaughter because I started talking to James Lindsay's stepdaughter after she outed herself the first time, when she started tweeting about the fact that James is in an open marriage with his wife, that his wife doesn't. I don't know if she tweeted about this, but she told me about this. His wife doesn't want to be in the open marriage, but James kind of forced his wife to be in the open marriage because James wants to fuck all the wine moms at his events all over the country. And so the wife doesn't want to be in the open marriage. The wife isn't sleeping with anyone else. James has forced his wife to do this because he wants to bang other people all over the country. And the wife lets him do it because apparently they have scheduled private time with each other where James gives her all the attention. And the reason I know that is I actually know one of the women James was fucking. So it's not theoretical that James was fucking other women outside his marriage. I literally know one of the people he was fucking, and I suspected it before I found out that he was in an open marriage, and then it was confirmed for me later after I found out that he was in an open marriage. So I actually do have the inside tea. Not only that I know James Lindsay's stepdaughter and have been talking to her for like a minute, but I also know one of the people that James was fucking, and she hates him right now, by the way, because of how insane he's gone. So she completely regrets that whole affair. Anyway, so I've documented all this stuff on the channel before. I'm not going to go rehash the whole thing, but suffice it to say that I have communicated with James Lindsay's stepdaughter off and on, mostly because I felt bad for her because she started getting piled on by all the people who hate James on the internet. And so I sent her a DM. I was like, hey, are you all right? You know, you can just like shut off the computer and you don't have to deal with any of this stuff. I was actually trying to be a good person when I first started communicating with her. And then she started talking to me and she started telling me stuff. And I was just trying to be a good person, man. I actually wasn't fishing for information. I just knew that James wasn't helping her out. And so I wanted to, I maybe overstepped, but like when someone's getting piled on the internet, I don't actually like to see that. And I don't care if she's James Lindsay's stepdaughter or not. Like, no one deserved the type of treatment she was getting at that time without someone saying, hey, are you okay? It's all going to be all right. I've been piled on the internet many times. When someone steps in it, it's just not a fun thing to go through. And so I just wanted her to know that, like, you know, not everyone hated her. Not everyone was going to attack her, stuff like that. I also told her, don't trust anyone, including me. But she started talking to me and we started communicating. And in the course of us communicating, she told me things about James. I never asked for this information, but she told it to me, quite frankly, because she's pretty pissed at James for many reasons that I've gone over previously. And I think she wanted me to put it out in the public. And so I did, because I told her I was going to. Anyway, so James Lindsay's stepdaughter and I hadn't talked in a minute. And then I DM'd her about something the other day because she made a post on Twitter about, I'm not even going to say what it was about, but essentially I DM'd her. It wasn't about James or anything. I DM'd her and I was like, you know, the FBI could show up at your house, right? Like, just take that fucking post down. Like, don't be stupid. And she ended up taking it down. I'm not going to say what it was. It actually wasn't that bad, but I was like, you know, this could backfire on you and you probably don't want that. So I DM'd her and said that. And when I DM'd her and said that, I hadn't spoken to her in months. And she said to me, she said, Karlyn, I reached out to James a couple months ago. And what happened was that she tried to mend her relationship with James, because obviously she hadn't spoken to James for years before she outed him as having an open marriage, but she wanted to mend the relationship, and I think we can all understand that. And so she reached out to him in January and she said, can we just, like, you know, rebuild our relationship, because I really valued you raising me and all this stuff, and I'd like to be able to communicate with you and all this stuff. And I told you guys that when she reached out to James, James told her, you cost me $500,000 and stop fucking talking to Karlyn. And then he never spoke to her again. So this was in January. And I told you guys last week that this conversation happened, because I did. Okay. So last night, James Lindsay's stepdaughter starts tweeting screenshots from the text messages with James. And I just want to confirm that every single thing I said happened. This is a screenshot of tweets that she posted last night. She was responding to someone who didn't believe that she was actually James's stepdaughter. This is actually James's stepdaughter. And you can see here, this is James texting her. He says, this isn't a joke. When you stop providing Karlyn with any hope of information, she will be very nasty about you and tell her cult to attack you. Her apparent kindness is an act to get you to tell secrets about us. Now, this happened in January. It's now May. I have barely spoken to James Lindsay's stepdaughter in months. Have I ever told anyone to attack James Lindsay's stepdaughter? Has that ever happened? Have I ever said anything mean or nasty about her at all? Have I ever done anything that James is trying to convince people that I do? No. You want to know why? Because James' stepdaughter is a nice girl and I never actually was prying for information in the first place. Literally never told. In fact, I said the opposite. I said, you assholes are going to leave her alone. Yeah, and why would James try to gaslight his stepdaughter into believing that I'm going to attack her? Like, if I had done that, if I had ever said to attack her, it would have been clipped and put on the internet, but I didn't say that. Nope, never said that. Never said that. Literally never said that. My own audience would have attacked me for saying that, because we don't do that shit. And do you see what she responded right here? The people attacking me right now are your followers. They are under my posts being very mean. I understand they don't know the whole story, are just seeing random screenshots and posts and making assumptions, but it's nonstop comments about me. So James is literally trying to gaslight his own stepdaughter into believing that I'm the one that's going to attack her when I never did, when in fact it is James's followers that were attacking her the whole fucking time. And then this is the other thing, because this all came up because this tweet that she posted kind of went viral again yesterday, because of course James has been attacking Christians again, and James has been attacking Catholics again, and James has been making it very clear how much he abhors all people who follow a religion. But James has also been grifting off the Christian right for a good long time. And you guys remember yesterday when we watched James's speech, what question did we have yesterday when we watched James's speech? Because James in this speech wasn't talking to a Jewish audience, but he was talking about Torah and how the Jews are the chosen people and all this stuff. And we were like, why is James talking about the Torah and the Jews? And it sounded like he was preaching to them, but he wasn't talking to a Jewish audience. I think I now understand. I think that James has totally effed himself with his Christian audience. And the reason we're seeing James do all this woke right bullshit is he's pivoting over to the Jewish audience, because he totally effed himself with the Christian audience. A lot of his money came from doing talks with Christian groups and working with Christian groups. And now that has gone up in smoke because James has been acting like an unhinged retard on Twitter for months and months and months and months and months. And so now I think he's pivoting over to the Jewish audience, which is why he's talking about Torah and all sorts of Jewish related things for no apparent reason when he's doing a talk that is not to a Jewish organization. So I say that because back in January, James's stepdaughter tweeted this about him. When I was in high school, I told my parents I wanted to be a Christian, and my stepdad, James, said he was going to sit with me each night and read the Bible to show me why it was a made-up and evil book. I listened to him talk about every day about how stupid Christians are. I'm not a Christian, it was just a phase, but I'm shocked to see how many Christians follow him and believe he has their best interest at heart, unless something in him changed and he believes in the Bible now. This was in January. So last night, people were replying to that post. And what did James Lindsay's stepdaughter say? When I texted him in January, he told me I had lost him $500,000 he would have gotten from his Christian followers. When I first made this tweet, it was because I was seeing hundreds of people believing my stepdad is a Christian himself. I don't believe his view ever shifted, and that he's been pretending he believes it plays a role in society for money. So James apparently in January, the same time that he texted her and said, like, Karlyn's going to attack you unless you give her information, so you better back away from her quietly, which never happened. At the same time, James told her, you cost me $500,000 from my Christian followers. No, James, I think you cost yourself that money, bro. I think you cost yourself that money. And I also think you cost yourself your relationship with your stepdaughter, who loved you and wanted to rebuild a relationship with you, all because of your own fucking personal insanity. So that's our James update. I'm not going to say anything more about that right now. He completely blowtorched the relationship with his stepdaughter. And if people wonder why, and by the way, James went around saying that I was grooming his 28-year-old stepdaughter because I was talking to her and being nice to her. People might wonder why I've been doing that. I have a shitty relationship with my father. I know what it's like to have a shitty relationship with your father. I know what it's like to have a father who, quite frankly, is behaving like a fucking child, and how much that sucks. When you actually want to build a relationship and have a relationship with your parents, and your parents act like unhinged, raving fucking lunatics, I know how much that sucks, and I know how much that hurts. And I watched James attack his own stepdaughter on Twitter back in January. I documented it all at the time. James's stepdaughter was openly pleading with him to cut the bullshit, and he wouldn't do it. James's stepdaughter actually blocked his own stepdaughter on James actually blocked his own stepdaughter on Twitter because he was just blowtorching the relationship on Twitter because she was tweeting at him, begging him to stop, and he refused. And so people might judge me for talking to her, but I've never asked her for information. I've never tried to push beyond what she wanted to tell me. I've actually just been trying to be a good person to say, I've been in your shoes. I know how much it sucks. I'm sorry this is like this. And I never, never told anyone to attack her. I never said anything to her. And if people ever see our DMs someday, they'll see this openly. I never asked her for any information about James. I never prodded her. I never pushed. She offered it because she was pissed off at him because he's the one that blowtorched their relationship. And now he wants to pretend publicly that it's all everyone else's fault and that he's a family man with Christian values. No, he's not. He's not. And she's a grown adult too. She's about to turn 29. She can do what she wants. I don't need James's permission to talk to anyone that is of age, and certainly someone that he's not even talking to. So, that's all I have to say about that. You guys want to watch some communism? Let's watch some communism. Let's get into the actual show. Now, has anyone here not watched communism with me before? Please let us know in the chat if you're new to communism, like real communism. Because the reason I say that if you should let us know if you're new to communism is you might think that you understand the left, but until you've watched real communism, you probably don't. That's not shade on you. It's not your fault. But the language might be a little elusive for you. And so if you're new to watching communism and socialism, please ask questions if you don't understand something. The reason we do these streams is to teach people what's going on, but part of the teaching process of what's going on is that you have to understand the language. And so if you don't understand what they're saying, if you don't understand what they're talking about, please let us know in the chat. There are no stupid questions. We will answer any question that people have to the very best of our ability. I will also stop the presentation and break it down if I think that that is required. But we just listen to them and we listen to what they have to say and we analyze their language and we analyze their tactics and we talk about it. That's what we're doing. Well, this is actually pretty close. I have not watched real communism, but I'm pretty sure it reduces down to private property bad. Correct. When the left says capitalism, they mean private property ownership, bourgeois property specifically. And what they mean when they say bourgeois property, and this is really important to understand, is they mean your ability to own a home, your ability to own land, your ability to own an apartment rental that you rent out as a landlord, your ability to own intellectual property, your ability to own a private business, whether that private business is big or small. Here's the big one. When they say private property ownership, they mean parental rights. They believe parental rights over your children are a form of private property. They also mean your individual liberties as a form of private property, upholding individualism because they want a collectivist society. So it's important that we understand our definitions. Appreciate you bringing that up. Did communist communities in the U.S. rename to adult planned? No. This is no. I have no evidence of that. I don't know why you're asking that. No, they have not. No, to the best of my knowledge. But if you want to give me a specific example, I'm happy to look at it. All right, we're going to watch this presentation. Why we need to build a
greetings, everyone.
party
I'm
now.
James with Firebrand and the Denver.
So he's one of the leaders of the Denver Communists. He also does Firebrand. Like I said, basically the same organization.
Communists. We're about coming up on 3 years old, I think, at the end of this year. We have branches in Seattle and New York and Boston, as well as at-large members scattered across the country. We're formed by branches that stayed together after the ISO dissolved in 2019. So I'm really honored to speak alongside Congress.
Okay, so for people who don't know, and we have covered this on the channel before, the ISO was the International Socialist Organization. The International Socialist Organization several years ago had a massive sex scandal. It was like a Me Too scandal that essentially brought down the entire organization. And we actually watched a documentary about it on the channel many, many months ago. That was pretty interesting. So after the International Socialist Organization went down, they transformed into a couple different groups. One of those groups was Haymarket Books. Haymarket Books currently is the largest socialist book publisher in the United States. They are basically the International Socialist Organization rebranded. And then you have different kind of cells all over the country that were all connected to the International Socialist Organization that still operate today, like the Denver Communists / the Firebrand Collective. And so I think the Firebrand Collective is also trying to like carry on the tradition of the International Socialist Organization by organizing with people all over the country who were involved with it back then.
Comrades from the MST, Socialist Alternative, and Socialist Horizon. And thanks to all who came to listen, speak, and discuss and try to grind out this problem together. And thanks to Socialist Horizon comrades for putting this together and for getting us involved. So crisis and cruelty are inevitable under capitalism. Resistance to them is also inevitable, but the success of that resistance is contingent on the ideas and practices taken up by it. Revolutionary organization is meant to develop and spread ideas and practices that can win. Revolutionaries come together to understand and change the world. We study the history of class struggle. We learn from our political forebears. We learn from the exploited and oppressed, including those around us and those nowhere near us in space or time. We attempt to synthesize what we learn into a coherent conception of society and to a plan of attack on it. That's Marxism in a nutshell. Engels identified 3 interconnected forms of struggle: the economic, the political, and the ideological. In economic struggle, workers fight our bosses. In political struggle, we fight the boss's state. And in ideological struggle, we fight against the ideas that the bosses have installed like malware into our brains.
Okay. So that's actually an interesting kind of breakdown. How I usually teach this is that a lot of people believe that when the left says they want to abolish capitalism, they're talking about the economic system. They think the workers taking control of the means of production. That's just one of the aspects that they're talking about. The other aspect that I normally say is the cultural model, the aspects that uphold capitalist private property owning society. Okay. So what he just said is there's actually 3 different types of like capitalism that they're fighting against. There's the economic capitalism. There's political capitalism, which is the state. These people believe that the United States is literally built on capitalism. They believe the Constitution is a capitalist document. They believe the United States is a capitalist government. They believe that they cannot overthrow capitalism without overthrowing the Constitution and the United States government. All right. So he delineated the political model. And then what was the third that he said? The thing that installs these ideas like malware, the ideological struggle. So when they're talking about the ideological struggle, what are they going to be talking about? Things like the gender binary. Capitalism created the gender binary that put men and women in different roles that are oppressor versus oppressed. That's the patriarchy. That's going to be one of those ideological roles. The ideas that capitalism has installed into society. The nuclear family is going to be another one of those ideas because they believe the nuclear family is a capitalist unit of propertied relationship. So when they're saying ideological, maybe think of it like cultural Marxism, but I also like that he delineated out the political because it makes it really clear that they're talking about abolishing the state, abolishing the Constitution, overthrowing the United States government, which, by the way, I literally had the Denver Communists, specifically this group, on video talking about violent revolution against the government. So I'm not just saying this, I actually have them explicitly saying it. That was a clip that went viral last year sometime. And so they're telling you explicitly, we want to overthrow the economic model of capitalism. We want to overthrow the political model of capitalism, the Constitution, and we want to overthrow the ideological component of capitalism, which you consider to be the cultural model. Okay?
Ideas that the bosses have installed like malware into our brains. In political and economic struggle, we fight against our enemies. But in ideological struggle, we fight against our enemies' ideas in the minds of our allies.
Aha.
Those ideas, the ruling ideas, seek to justify the existing arrangement of society and to foreclose any possibility of system change. Revolutionary organization brings together the more advanced elements.
Yes. So exactly. Queer ideology is the manifestation of the cultural model of Marxism. Okay. So anytime we're talking about queer, and people need to understand this, queer is not the same as trans, queer is not the same as gay. Queer is a far left political ideology that seeks to destabilize or overthrow normativity, which means the norms that uphold capitalism. So queer is a component of attack specifically on the cultural components of capitalism.
Of the working class to systematically counter the influence of the ruling ideas. This involves what I like to call intra-left combat, mostly against liberalism and reformism, the dominant ideas in social movements, but also...
Okay, so he just said, I know I'm stopping a lot, but we need to break this down. He just said, we're fighting liberalism and reformism. Did everyone hear that? These are revolutionary communists. These are not liberals. These are not progressives. These are not Democrats. They see themselves as fighting liberalism, which they believe the Democratic Party is liberal. They don't like the Democratic Party. They protest the Democratic Party. They know they didn't vote for Kamala Harris. They hated her. So that's what they mean when they say liberal. It's like the Democratic establishment. When they say reformism, they're talking about the Democratic Socialists of America. A lot of people think the Democratic Socialists of America are the most far left group out there. They're not by a long shot. The Democratic Socialists of America are reformists in their eyes. Reformism means that they want to work within the current electoral system in order to create a post-capitalist society. So they do have the same goal as getting to a post-capitalist society, but they want to work within the current system to do that. Revolutionary groups like the Denver Communists, like the groups involved in the Firebrand Collective, they don't believe that reformism is possible. They don't believe it's going to work. And so they believe that the Democratic Socialists are not actually real socialists because they're not revolutionary socialists who believe in overthrowing the government. When did queer become a political ideology? Actually, the first documented moment that I have found is in 1964, when queer was first referenced as an anti-capitalist ideology. There may be something earlier, but that's the first one that I found. What happened is it really started to percolate in the 70s in different subcultures. So if you were in the punk scene in San Francisco in the 1970s, you probably were around queer being used as like a political ideology, an anti-capitalist ideology. When it really exploded was in the 80s. So queer ideology as a political ideology exploded under conservative presidents. This is another reason people have to be wary of saying Trump's winning, Trump's winning. Queer ideology exploded under Ronald Reagan. It continued to get perpetuated under George H.W. Bush. The first major queer activist movement was called the ACT UP movement, which was a movement in the 80s designed to push Ronald Reagan to talk about the AIDS crisis. That was a queer activist movement that inspired militant queer activism that we experience today. So, started in the 60s, possibly earlier, but definitely by the 60s, was percolating was percolating in the 70s, but really exploded as a subculture in the 80s, and then continued to get perpetuated in the 90s and the 2000s. And the militant queer ideology that we're experiencing today, it's a mutated strain of Marxism. It's not pure Marxism. It's its own subculture. We spend a lot of time talking about it. I'm currently writing 2 books about it at the same time, if such a thing is possible. And so it is its kind of like own manifestation. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You're not listening. LGBT is not the same as queer. Not in any way. In fact, the queer community in the 70s were telling people that gay is not queer. They were being explicit about it. So no, this does not explain any of your experiences with the LGBT community at all, because the LGBT community is not queer ideology. They are 2 completely different things. Let us know if you have questions. But do you get it? Do you? Because when you come back and say, okay, now I understand everything about LGBT when we were talking about queer, it makes me question if you actually get it. So if you don't get it, now is the time to say that you don't get it, and so we can explain it to you. Let us know.
I like to call intra-left combat, mostly against liberalism and reformism, the dominant ideas in social movements, but also against ultra-leftism and the various socialisms from above, which also lead struggle in the wrong direction. Ultimately, the purpose of the Revolutionary Party is to organize the insurrection. But in the meantime, it must win countless.
Well, that was a little on the nose, wasn't it? The purpose of the revolutionary... Well, let's just see if we can get that on screen. Ultimately, the purpose of the Revolutionary Party...
Revolutionary Party is to organize the insurrection.
The purpose of the Revolutionary Party is to organize the insurrection. Oh. Let's come back to that in a second. Intentionally blank. Queer movement didn't want gay marriage? No! They did not. The queer ideology was actively fighting against gay marriage. They were actively fighting. They call groups like the Human Rights Campaign. The Human Rights Campaign is one of the main groups that was campaigning for gay marriage in the 2000s. The queer activists hated the Human Rights Campaign. They were actively battling against the Human Rights Campaign. If you look at their writings from 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, we talk about them on this channel all the time. They were vehemently opposed to gay marriage. They didn't want people spending any time on it because they believe that marriage is a bourgeois form of property relations. They believe that marriage is a capitalist institution that the gays were assimilating to, and they call that homonormativity. They don't like that. So no, queer activists do not want gay marriage. In fact, the right, in trying to repeal gay marriage now, is actively doing the bidding of the most far-left queer activists in the country who never wanted gay marriage to be legalized in the first place, because they believe that by legalizing gay marriage, you took this group of people who were oppressed and you gave them a pathway to assimilating to capitalist culture in the United States. Would you say Trump is falling into the pitfall? I have no idea, man. I have no idea if Trump is falling into the pitfalls of Reagan and Bush. What I can say is Trump has not stopped the problem, and that if people think that queer ideology specifically is not going to perpetuate because Donald Trump is president, that's retarded, because queer ideology initially perpetuated and really exploded under Ronald Reagan. So just like the right likes to be opposition, the right is never happier than when they have no power, but they can be controlled opposition. The left also likes being opposition because anytime the left is in opposition, they feel like they're victims of the world and their ideas tend to explode and proliferate.
But in the meantime, it must win countless lesser battles and debates.
Hang on. Let's go back and just get him talking about the insurrection again.
Various socialisms from above, which also lead struggle in the wrong direction. Ultimately, the purpose of the Revolutionary Party is to organize the insurrection.
Bing.
But in the meantime, it must win countless lesser battles and debates within the movement. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Our immediate task is not to build a revolutionary party, but to grow and improve our tiny propaganda groups, and when it makes sense to merge them. We must not overestimate our capabilities and our tasks. We can't fast forward to an effective revolutionary party just because we desperately need to. Our situation is undoubtedly urgent, but we must be diligent and patient with goals so modest as to seem disrespectful of that urgency, like getting 20 people to read Rosa Luxemburg together. Overestimating our capabilities and our current tasks, or catastrophizing about our predicament can lead to opportunism, adventurism, or a combination of both. That could look like tailing a movement's politics in order.
Well, Donnie girl, yeah, this is actually exactly what I tell people. Maybe it's up to us, we the people in our communities, to stop it directly. Yes. That's why I spend all my time teaching about this stuff. My goal isn't to get on Fox News or to please any of these lying conservative influencers, because they're going to be shilling a narrative no matter what. My goal is to talk to real people who are actually concerned about what the left is doing, because you guys need to understand that it's up to all of us to do something about this. All of us. And the reason I do this is that I'm in a position where I can spend a lot of my time researching and teaching people about this. And so I'm trying to give you guys as many resources as possible. I'm trying to give you guys as much information as possible. I'm trying to teach you guys how to identify it when it shows up in the real world, because you guys have to go into your community and actually do something about it. Okay? So that's why we do this. Trump isn't going to save us. The Republican establishment isn't going to save us. You cannot rely on any of them. You have to rely on yourself. And the first step is coming here and learning as much as you can. And I will teach you as much as I can. But then the goal after that is to go into your communities, talk to your friends, talk to your family, use the resources that I create for you to show them what's going on, because we have to wake more people up to what this problem is.
To recruit, papering over significant differences in order to fuse groups, or going underground prematurely because fascism seems to be at the door. Our immediate task is not to build mass organization based on joint activity, but cadre organization based on a clear and coherent set of politics. Cadre is a military term swiped by socialists to mean the core activists of a revolutionary organization, dedicated opponents of the system, thinkers and fighters, students and teachers, and what Gramsci called permanent persuaders. Such an organization must strive to become a relevant fighting force, but its near-term interventions will be more ideological than practical. We can't snap our fingers and materialize a mass revolutionary party, but developing cadre and building interventionist propaganda groups, to borrow a term from Socialist Alternative, we can lay the necessary foundation. To our Socialist Horizon comrades, we need each other. This was made particularly clear by the domination of the Palestine Solidarity Movement by Social Democrats, Stalinists, and Maoists, and then made more clear by the campus left's reaction to the fall of Assad. We're alone in a wilderness of garbage politics. We belong to—
I just want people to note, he was not saying Maoists and Stalinists there in a complimentary way. These people hate Maoists and they hate Stalinists. So all these groups hate each other. So they don't all hate each other. A lot of these groups actually play very nicely together. However, there is one very distinct schism that exists on the far left. Well, actually, no, there's two. There's two distinct schisms that exist on the far left. The first one we've already talked about, which is the difference between reformists and revolutionaries. The reformists being the ones who want to work within the electoral system. The revolutionaries, these people wanting to overthrow the electoral system. That's one. The other schism that exists is the Marxist-Leninists versus the Stalinists. So the vast majority of socialist activists in the United States are Marxist-Leninists. These people are Marxist-Leninists. Marxist-Leninists hate Stalinists. So there are some Stalinist organizations in the United States. The Party for Socialism and Liberation tends to veer more Stalinist. They're the ones he mentioned in terms of being the ones that organized the campus protests because they were intimately involved in that. They tend to veer more Stalinist. Maoism is also going to overlap with that because Mao comes in the tradition of Stalin. But most socialist activists in the United States hate the Stalinists because they basically believe that Stalin ruined everything. And if they follow Stalin's lead, then real socialism will never be tried. So you do get some shit talking between the Marxist-Leninists and the Stalinists, and include the Maoists in that, again, because Mao comes in the tradition of Stalin in their eyes. And you get some shit talking regarding reformist versus revolutionary. Hey, Dragon Balls! The radical left spark was lit decades ago, slowly spreading throughout our systems via institutions. Trump and Republicans before him is gasoline. Stopping the left politically top down is futile. So true, Dragon Balls. So true. I appreciate it.
Together, but only on a firm foundation. We're in close political agreement. Justin recently said that we're more politically united than the Bolsheviks on the eve of revolution, and I tend to agree. though there are a lot of disagreements, but I don't think that's Justin's point. We do share a political lineage. We share a focus on class struggle and class.
Hang on. Sorry. People asking some really great questions, and I love answering questions as we're listening to socialism. What about the gender people, the queer Marxists, versus the regular binary people, the people that believe men and women are a thing? So an example of this is going to be the Revolutionary Communists of America. The Revolutionary Communists of America is a communist political party. If you guys have seen those viral videos on Twitter of all of the communists in the red t-shirts protesting in the streets, that's the Revolutionary Communists of America. The Revolutionary Communists of America are recruiting all over college campuses. They're recruiting in unions. They have grown dramatically in size in the last couple of years. And we've seen them in a ton of viral videos. I bring them up specifically because the Revolutionary Communists of America explicitly reject queer ideology. So they're Marxist-Leninists. They are revolutionaries. They created their political group in order to elicit the revolution in this country. They're very clear about this. We have them on video saying they're going to overthrow the government, saying they're going to raise the red flag of communism above the White House. But they explicitly reject queer ideology. However, what is happening within the Revolutionary Communists of America, and I know this because I've watched their organizing meetings, queer ideology is starting to slowly make its way in. And so every once in a while, when you're on these organizing meetings, you see queer activists, and they're there, and they're relevant in the dialogue. And so what I think is going to happen eventually is that queer Marxism will co-opt that political party, because they're going to get the more successful the political party gets on the far left, the more queer Marxists are going to join it. The more queer Marxists that join it, the higher the likelihood that they're going to co-opt it and then veer it back in the direction of queer ideology, which is what they want anyway. So that's an example of what happens in those circumstances. Queer ideology is like a parasite that attaches itself to things and then completely corrupts it with the most dystopian, crazy nonsense imaginable. But that's how you have to yeah, well, it's not about being gay though. Like, anyone can be queer. But that is what I think is going to happen. But that was a really great question.
Independence, and on anti-oppression and social movements. We both reject electoralism and campism. But we need to agree on strategy too, specifically on cadre building, propaganda, and socialist intervention. We should organize around a clear and specific set of politics rather than around common work. It makes no sense for us to combine with those pointing toward the Squad and the Democratic Party or Chavismo.
It makes no sense for us to combine with the Squad or the Democratic Party. These people hate AOC. They do not support AOC. They do not support Bernie Sanders. They think aligning with them makes no sense at all. I've learned more in 20 minutes than I ever did reading James. Yeah, welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. It's a common story in my community. Again.
Rather than around common work. It makes no sense for us to combine with those pointing toward the Squad and the Democratic Party or Chavismo or the so-called axis of resistance or a protracted people's war or communes or co-ops as the way forward. These politics are incompatible with ours and must be debated and defeated, ultimately, not accommodated to or invited into our organizations. And we need to shed any hesitation about the need to argue with people, about the need for polemic and for focusing on what distinguishes our politics from the rest of the left. In Firebrand, we think we're stronger on our own than those that do not take up this basic strategy, which seems to us like basic Leninism. But to wrap up, the approach I've sketched out here underpins our dedication to the study of the history of class struggle and to Marxist theory, strategy, and tactics, which are no more than the synthesized lessons of that history. It's the motivation for learning to think, argue, and fight together as Marxists, for standing with the rebels on picket lines and against riot lines, come what may, for all the meetings and readings and writings and kickoffs and report backs and discussions, for making hard arguments about what should be done next at crucial junctures in a movement, for building locally while reaching for higher levels of national organization and international connection, for flying our red flag high as a signal to all who might take at least a few steps forward with us. We may be few, we may be unable to flex as fully as we'd like to at this point, but we do have a firm grasp on genuine Marxism.
I just want to let people know who might be new. Do not be fooled at all the self-deprecating, like we don't actually have that much power and things are just horrible and we can only get people together for a book club. Don't buy into any of this, okay? Because they say this all the time. These people have to convince themselves that they're losing at all times. That's what keeps the revolution perpetual, but it's not actually true. They just have to convince themselves of it.
And Leninism, they're the best tool set for understanding the compounding crises and cruelties of capitalism, and the best tool set for organizing its downfall. And I'm looking forward to using them together with you, comrades, more effectively. So glad to be at the table with you, comrades in Socialist Horizon, back at the table, and glad to be in the struggle with you all until victory.
All right, thank you, comrade. Powerful, very nice. Appreciate that. Kim, have you located your presentation? All right, yes. Outstanding.
Yes.
Well, this is going to follow. Kim's is going to follow really nicely from James, because I know this is a great presentation. Go for it, Kim.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. In this presentation, I hope to lay out a picture of the material circumstances we find ourselves in as revolutionary socialists here in the USA today. We as revolutionaries have the intention of organizing differently to the two main forms of political trends on the left, the first being reformism, as is represented by the politics of the DSA, Bernie Sanders, and AOC, and the other by a myriad of Stalinist organizations. Our orientation is instead one based on socialism from below, i.e. a Leninist project, which involves creating an organization with a clear political point of view that endeavors to engage with mass movements, strikes, rebellions, and revolutionary upheavals. Growing the numbers of highly class-conscious and committed revolutionary workers via this participation allows us to build up an ever larger, stronger project capable of leading the struggle against ruling classes nationally and internationally. We have the aim of overthrowing the capitalist state and replacing it with a socialist society, aiming ultimately to become a communist one. In the US,
we have
a system of two.
Hang on, I'm sorry, say that again. Say that again.
Ruling classes nationally and internationally. We have the aim of overthrowing the capitalist state and replacing it with a socialist society, aiming ultimately to become a communist one.
We have the aim of overthrowing the capitalist state. That means the Constitution and the government. And they aren't even hiding it. By the way, we have watched Socialist Horizon before, but Socialist Horizon does seem to be getting a little bit more active lately, and so probably we need to start paying more attention to them, because I think they've gotten more active since Trump got back into office. But let's just listen again, just to make sure we heard it correctly.
Workers via this participation allows us to build up an ever larger, stronger project capable of leading the struggle against ruling classes nationally and internationally. We have the aim of overthrowing the capitalist state and replacing it with a socialist society, aiming ultimately to become a communist one.
Yep.
In the US, we have a system of two proudly capitalist parties who differ largely in style versus substance.
That means they think both parties are capitalist parties and they want to overthrow both capitalist parties. This means they're not Democrats. They hate the Democrats. Listen.
And Democrats are committed to repressing and exploiting the working classes.
Republicans and Democrats are committed to exploiting the working classes. Again.
Who differ largely in style versus substance. Republican and Democrats are committed to repressing and exploiting the working classes
Yep.
and oppressed groups.
Uh-huh.
The government's configuration determined by the capitalist ruling class makes any attempt at any alternative voice within government, let alone building an alternative reformist third party, impossible. As we know, the Democratic Party, with the full agreement of the Republican Party, is responsible for financing the murder of 65,000 people and the displacement of 2 million people in the Gaza genocide
Mhm.
to the tune of $21 million in the last 18 months.
You guys think that these people voted for Kamala Harris? I don't think these people voted for Kamala Harris.
I think it's critical we start our analysis with the genocide, given the Democratic Party is considered by unions and millions of others as the party of workers and oppressed communities. Their willingness to finance a genocide for the purpose of controlling the mining, processing, and distribution of Black gold clearly puts that lie to bed. Democratic administrations and Republican administrations alike endlessly attack migrants via Border Patrol, ICE, detention centers, remain in Mexico policy, and mass deportations. They criminalize vast numbers of human beings by falsely claiming that they are, quote, muling fentanyl, or, quote, perpetuating crime, and, quote, using resources meant for native-born citizens.
Hang on. We got a question from Intentionally Blank. Are a majority of these people Gen X and Boomers? No, not at all. You're seeing, like, I mean, obviously you're seeing some older people on the screen here, but there really is a large variety of age range. The right likes to focus on clips of older people to try to convince you that younger people aren't into this, but I've been undercover at their events. I've seen them. The crowds have all ages. And quite frankly, the older ones are the ones I'm least concerned about, because the older socialists and communists tend to be more of like the hippie types, where they got into this in like the 60s and they're still going to their socialist events. Now, this woman seems to be a little bit more militant than that, but usually it's actually not even the older people you have to worry about. The younger people are far more militant. They're far more radicalized. They're far more extreme. And when I say younger, I think of younger because I'm of a certain age. Anyone like 35 and under typically is going to be significantly more militant than anyone that's like 35 or older. And that has to do with when this stuff started getting into the schools and was solidified in the schools and all that. So no, it is completely false for anyone to say that these are all older people. They're just not. It just happens to be that we're watching an older woman right this second. But we've gone inside their actual organizing calls. The Denver Communists specifically have younger people on their organizing calls. They're just not always the ones talking.
To scapegoat undocumented immigrants and asylum seekers. They do this as they need to deflect their own responsibility for the conditions faced by underpaid native-born workers struggling to access groceries, rent, and healthcare. Additionally, attacking and repressing migrant workers while simultaneously hiring them is critical, as it provides bosses with a highly controlled and therefore more exploitable and disposable workforce. While the Democrats failed at increasing the minimum wage, creating national health care, ending government student loans, or addressing the climate crisis, they succeeded at crushing unions, expanding fracking, bombing countries across the globe, and enabling the genocide we are currently witnessing in Palestine. The shock and awe from the endless executive orders handed down by Trump since his first day in office and their repercussions have rattled workers, seniors, and oppressed communities' senses of well-being and actual well-being, causing protests on campuses and in cities large and small across the country that have been led mostly by either pro-Palestine groups or liberal pro-Democratic Party organizations. The New World Order will have consequences that cannot be addressed by these means and will rather require radical mass protests, strikes, and rebellions. Today, we see that migrants of every status, trans people, queer people, and those who can become pregnant are all in the crosshairs, as are people of color and disabled individuals. We see attacks on DEI, gutting the federal public education system, curtailing FEMA, firing tens of thousands of federal workers, and ending union rights for hundreds of thousands, hobbles and potentially ends state programs from Head Start to cancer research. Xenophobia of every type will continue to be promoted by the media, bosses, and politicians. Liberals will continue to liberal, promoting business unions, Democratic politicians, and the courts.
Oh, liberals will continue to promote the courts. Did you guys know the communists want to abolish all of our courts? Specifically, they believe that the courts are an unelected branch of government that deliberately obfuscate the will of the people. So in the communist utopia, there will be no courts. They envision it getting rid of them entirely. There'll also be no prisons, by the way. No one's going to jail in the communist utopia except if you're a thought criminal. They want to repurpose the prisons to be gulags. We actually have them on video saying this. But yeah, the courts are one of the things they want to get rid of. And they believe that the liberals are going to, continue to utilize the courts. How funny.
As the answer to the crisis for which all of the reasons I shared above will undoubtedly fail. The endless chaos Trump has ushered in has the whole country/world on edge. The changes to international financial arrangements, from the free trade globalization of the last several decades to the isolationist tariffs on a seemingly endless roller coaster, will in fact hasten a world recession as corporations and governments make decisions about how and whether to invest, to buy and sell stocks, land, corporations, and raw materials, and potentially to engage in open warfare for the Panama Canal, Greenland, Iran, as well as continue the wars over Gaza and Ukraine. This precariousness will inevitably lead to large-scale inflation, layoffs, foreclosures, hunger, homelessness, misery, and death. The consequences of these actions will cause millions of people to look right, but millions of others will look left. As revolutionary socialists, we know we live in a global capitalist and imperialist system that without a mass fight from millions of workers here in the US and hundreds of millions around the world, will continue down this disastrous road. We don't know when mass struggle will break out, but we can be sure it will happen, suddenly and explosively, as we are currently seeing in Argentina. We know from living in the belly of the...
Okay, this is important. Socialists and communists generally believe that we are in late-stage capitalism. They believe, and we actually heard them say this on Socialism Saturday. We heard, Philip from Red May on Socialism Saturday said, maybe 10 to 12 years before we get our revolution. So what socialists believe is the revolution could break out at any moment, and it's just is there going to be some spark that's going to light into a fire that's going to lead to mass uprising that will appear to be spontaneous, and in some respects it will be. It'll be a response to something that's happened. But part of the reason we're seeing so many socialist groups form into formalized political parties, from the Revolutionary Communists of America to the Party of Socialism and Liberation to the Denver Communists starting this Firebrand Collective, we're starting to see a lot of organizations actually start to build political parties around this. It's not because they want to participate in elections. Because remember, these are revolutionary socialists. They do not want to participate in elections. They don't think elections are going to do anything. But what a political party does is it gives people something to join, and it gives people something to be a part of. It gives them a way to organize. It gives them a way to do educational outreach and things like that. So basically, they're forming these revolutionary parties, which is the title of this presentation, why we need to build the Revolutionary Party now. They are forming these revolutionary parties because they want to be prepared when the revolution breaks out, which they very literally believe could happen at any time. Does that make sense to everyone? Let me know if you have questions in the chat. Question: for wanting to overthrow a government, why are they so upset for defunding government programs? Because it's still a capitalist government. So they don't care about things being defunded. They care about whether or not the Constitution is a capitalist document and whether or not the government operates as a capitalist government. So they don't care about defunding things. Their goal isn't to defund things. Their goal is to abolish it entirely.
Beast that each person who becomes a revolutionary socialist will become a leader, and the leadership they can each offer matters. Nature abhors a vacuum. The Democrats expect to win big in 18 months, but the damage is already well underway, and neither party can stop the existing and impending crisis. It is critical that we come together to fight for revolutionary organization across the US and internationally, and in fact is the only way we can win. We can't know where rebellions will explode. We know that they will happen. The more that comrades in communities, states, countries, and even continents are tied together through serious socialist organization, the more possible successful revolutions become. Revolution is not a pipe dream. It is an inevitable circumstance and reaction to the injustices felt throughout the world today. And we as revolutionary socialists need to be ready to respond effectively to bring about once and for all the fall of capitalism and imperialism. And for this to happen, we need a united and strong revolutionary socialist organization.
So she just said what I just explained. They need the organization because the organization allows them to give people something to join and allows them to organize with other groups, not only in the country, but all over the world. So the Firebrand Collective wants to organize and take advantage of political turmoil in order to agitate for a revolution. Well, yes, but it's not just the Firebrand Collective. This is just one like group of organized cells, but it's representative of something that is not just real for them, it's real for other socialist groups too. But yeah, essentially they're agitating. Yeah, community organizing, exactly.
Today, we in many ways find ourselves in an inverse world to that of the one Lenin built with the Bolsheviks. Unlike Lenin and the Bolsheviks, we do not live in a barely capitalized society where 90% of the population are peasants who'd only become free of serfdom 30 years prior. On the contrary, in 2025, our world is overwhelmingly developed with the capacity to create wealth in abundance, including food, housing, healthcare, and all the necessities everyone could require for a meaningful life. What is not inverse and makes the need for an organization that aspires to become a Leninist party is the size and character of the ruling class and its states. Laws, courts, police, prisons, ICE, BPS, detention centers inside and outside of US borders, weaponry, the Army, Navy, Air Force, National Guard. Additionally, the ownership of mainstream media, the regulation of primary education and higher education, and most silently, but most powerfully, corporate power over workers with the capacity to hire, fire, and dictate conditions of employment.
Girlfriend just gave us a long list of things that they want to abolish in the socialist utopia. Should we go back and listen to that list again? All of those things would go away. Now, don't get confused though. They would still keep public education, but they would be in control of it. They would be the ones dictating the jobs that people got. All of that would be dictated by a centralized like decision-making force. But let's just go over that list again, shall we?
Character of the ruling class and its states. Laws, courts, police, prisons, ICE, BPS, detention centers inside and outside of US borders, weaponry, the Army, Navy, Air Force, National Guard. Additionally, the ownership of mainstream media, the regulation of primary education and higher education, and most silently, but most powerfully, corporate power over workers with the capacity to hire, fire, and dictate conditions of employment. And in the US, of course, also the only way to access quality healthcare. That overwhelming capitalist infrastructure, if you will, means the state.
The overwhelming capitalist infrastructure. of the government, the prisons, the military, regulation of education, corporate America. That's all capitalist infrastructure that they want to abolish.
That overwhelming capitalist infrastructure, if you will, means the state is intensely powerful, organized, and institutionalized. Our one opportunity to end this tyranny lies in our ability to organize ourselves, not only to strike, but to make those strikes meaningful by building a mass revolutionary party out of them.
Mm-hmm.
I hope this information will be helpful in framing why it's so critical we begin working towards such a formation as soon as possible. Bringing existing revolutionary organizations who believe in revolutionary struggle from below and are moving towards ever greater political agreement matters in today's dire national and international circumstances. We need a party that's opposed to both capitalist parties. We need an organization that's clear on the critical need to build an explicitly Leninist party. Capitalism is global. Revolutionary socialists must be international if there's any hope of an ultimate victory.
So one of the reasons that Marxist-Leninists really dislike Stalinists is because they believe that Stalin didn't make the revolution global, and they believe that the communist revolution will only succeed and real communism will only be tried when it is a global revolution, because they think that you can't have a communist state surrounded by capitalist states and still have the revolution be successful.
We will not win if we do not oppose Stalinism and reformism and actively organize an anti-fascist movement.
Oh!
Workers will never take control of society and win a revolution if they
it's
are
like I'm right about everything.
Fighting every form of oppression is critical. I look forward to discussing these thoughts with all of you in a more detailed way this afternoon.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's talk. Stop reading speeches.
Thank you so much,
stop.
Kim. Thank you for reminding us of the need for ourselves to organize and to do this internationally, that we can only win working class revolution by joining hands across borders, and which is why we are so happy to have two of our comrades here from across those borders. And I want to turn now to our third speaker, Alejandro Bodart from the Argentine MST.
No Spanish.
I want to clarify
no
something
Spanish.
I said earlier about
Por favor.
Listening to Alejandro's presentation. His presentation will be in Spanish.
No!
If you go to the little circle with the three dots on the bottom of your screen on your bar, and you click on it, you'll have an interpretation bar will pop up. If you wish to listen to Alejandro's
no burrito
in English, choose the English option.
I hope they included the English option.
So is that clear? Otherwise, you will hear it in Spanish.
Oh,
so
God.
Folks want to take a second to make sure that
no
their setting is in English.
Español, si vous plaît.
Then we can go ahead and hand it over
taco.
to Alejandro.
No bueno.
So thank you, Alejandro, for coming. We're really honored that you're here, and we look forward to hearing your discussion. The floor is yours. Thank you.
English, por favor.
Bueno, buenos días a todos.
No.
¿Se escucha bien? ¿Están todos en el canal adecuado?
Okay.
Sí. Bueno, en primer lugar, felicitaciones a los compañeros que...
All right, we're not listening to Spanish. I'm sorry. We're fast forwarding through the Spanish speaking portion of this presentation. I don't care.
Sin sectarismo.
No, no sí. No bueno. No habla español.
Thank you, comrade.
Thank you, comrade.
We feel that urgency. We feel that need for a first step, and that we must step towards each other. It was a very powerful argument for why we are here tonight, to regroup and to build the strongest possible revolutionary party. Thank you so much, comrade. If you're hearing that in English, you can leave your setting where it is for the rest of the meeting, and the rest of the meeting will be in English.
Oh, thank God.
We have one final speaker. We're really, really happy that Jordan Humphreys from our comrade group in Australia, Socialist Alternative, is going to come and
Australia!
speak to now on the same question of the need for a revolutionary party. Jordan, thank you for coming, and please go ahead and take the floor.
Awesome. And thanks so much for having me, comrades. It's really refreshing
Crikey.
to be in a meeting with revolutionaries in the United States who aren't just interested in, patching up some of the bad parts of the system or trying to push the Democrats a bit to the left or whatever, but are actually about, tearing the head off the system and building a revolutionary alternative to it. A lot of the newer comrades that I know here, they ask a lot when they're looking at all the crazy stuff that's going in the United States, what's happening with the revolutionary left. They want to know, like, are they, getting together, they're organizing, they're expanding their influence. So it's really, brilliant to see that there's a bunch of comrades coming together to discuss these issues and work out next steps. Something which really drove home to me the need for revolutionary organization and a mass revolutionary party in the future was when I was visiting South America at the end of last year. I went to Argentina and met up with comrades in the MST, but I also went to Chile. And partly I went there because it was the 5th anniversary of the 2019 revolt that people probably remember, a huge movement against the neoliberal government and all the attacks going on, so heroic and impressive. But one of the really revealing and confronting things about it was 5 years after that revolt, it left relatively little legacy in Chile. Like, we spoke to a lot of young people who were involved in the revolt. A lot of them didn't even want to talk to us about it. They were like, oh, we tried to change the world, we failed. It's really sad. I don't want to talk to you about that anymore. A lot of the left groups had anniversary events to talk about what happened, the way forward, what we can learn from it, and so forth. And a lot of people found it really difficult to grapple with that, considering what happened. And there was a lot of political confusion because the Boric government had co-opted a whole section of the activist movement around it, had tried to diffuse that and channel that in a way which had nothing to do with the original inspiration behind the revolt. And the thing that really drove home to me is a lot of the time, even in Australia, in our revolutionary group, you can feel like, oh, one day there'll be a big movement, mass struggle, mass protests, and then that will solve all our problems. Because then, everyone becomes a revolutionary, then things will be fantastic. And obviously that would be a fantastic step forward. But we need to build organization as well. It's not enough to just, wait and hope for a future rebellion to break out to resolve the difficulties to the left. It also reminded me of something that Lenin talks about and what is to be done. A lot of people try and accuse him of being a substitutionalist for the mass struggles of workers, but it's actually the opposite. The reason why he was so strong on the question of the Revolutionary Party was not because he didn't have faith in the ability of workers to transform the world, it's because he did have faith. He knew that they were the ones who were going to fight back and struggle against the system, and therefore that there was a realistic basis to think that a mass revolutionary party could be formed out of that if people were willing to, do the hard work of making that actually come about.
Do the work.
Now, of course, as a number of the speakers have said, we can't, click our fingers and magic up a mass revolutionary party out of nowhere. And anyone who says that, is just kind of bullshitting you. Across the world, we don't have the necessary forces to make that happen in an immediate sense. And it can be really difficult dealing with that gap between the objective need for mass revolutionary parties, considering everything that's going on, and what we're able to do in the here and now. But I think that shouldn't paralyze us. It should spur us on to do everything we can to start to build with the forces that we have. I think that's also important because there's been a lot of debates around the question of revolutionary organization in recent years, on the international left, particularly in the English-speaking world. And a number of those debates have really been kind of distractions and diversions from a lot of the main issues. So for a whole period, there was a real enthusiasm for kind of neo-reformist parties, broad left parties of various different sorts. I'm sure many comrades are familiar with that, which were often posed as the idea that revolutionary politics are so marginal, they'll never break out, they'll be irrelevant. Instead, we need a new broad thing, and maybe reform versus revolution doesn't really matter anymore, and people are exaggerating its significance, and aren't you so sectarian for talking about revolution when we just need, big, broad organizations in order to push the left forward. And that could seem to to respond to a real desperate need to rebuild the workers' movement, the left, in a situation of crisis and the rise of the far right and so forth. But as we've seen throughout the years, these projects have not taken the left forward. In country after country, they have led to demoralization and division because the politics of these organizations cannot stand up to capitalism, let alone get anywhere close to revolution. They can't even lead to serious advances in the interests of the oppressed and the exploited. And a number of comrades talked about the reasons why, but that's been really driven home. Example after example: Corbyn, Sanders, Podemos, Syriza. And I see there's people today saying, "Oh, we just need another new left broad party," and it's as if that never happened. Amnesia about it, but we all have seen what has happened, and how that enthusiasm can quickly lead to demoralization. The other kind of issue which has come up a lot, I think, is people looking towards mass movements and activism, which is absolutely key and important, obviously, to reviving the left, and any revolutionary organization worth its salt would be throwing themselves into that. But that can become a substitute for trying to build organizations.
I forgot that I took it out of my pocket.
Oh!
Go on mute, comrade. Because, all the activism and movement work in the world, while really important, can't be a substitute for also building revolutionary organizations that can cohere the courage and heroism of people into stable, ongoing groups that can, draw out the lessons from the struggles, their strengths and weaknesses, that can broaden out and unite different struggles that are going on, particularly in the moment where there's so many different groups in society. They're under attack in a variety of different ways. So it's really important that we build and convince people of that. And that was one of the big projects for us in Socialist Alternative in the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which has in the United States and many countries has been the enormous issue that has really politicized so many young people, has totally transformed things for a whole generation of people I know in Australia, like made the question of US imperialism so on the forefront of their minds in a way that it wasn't.
I think this is just going to be about Australia. I don't think they're going to do anything else after this because the Denver communists usually don't post their full Q&As, which suck. So I want to watch a different presentation. We have about 45 minutes left, guys. As a reminder, in about 45 minutes, we are going to be doing a spy stream, and we're going to be switching over to a different stream. And what we're going to be doing is going inside a live leftist training at around 8 p.m. tonight. So I hope people who are here for the communism will stick around, and we will watch a live leftist training in about an hour. But we have some time to kill before then. And so I think we can watch another presentation from the Denver communists. Let's see. What do we want to watch? Let's look at this. Everything you hate is in fascism. Let's see what they had to say here.
It is now common on the broad left to refer to the second Trump administration as fascists. I would go as far as to say that this view is now standard. As I think we can all see from protest signs and memes and the discourse, many liberals and most radicals agree on this point. And I think that's why Anderson reached out so we could have a meeting and talk about this. There are understandable reasons for all this. We've got Elon Musk's Nazi salute on Inauguration Day. We've got the extra legal ICE raids and Trump's ramped up war on the oppressed, on democratic rights, and on seemingly anything good in society. These are all certainly terrifying developments. Certainly these events share some characteristics in common with fascism. Certainly Trump has fascists among his base of support and even a few in his White House. Certainly the US is in a profound crisis, but we reject the idea that all this amounts to fascism specifically. I'm going to argue Trump doesn't have the support he would need to become a fascist dictator, either from the ruling class or from the masses. And I'm also going to argue that that's not his goal.
So true.
So here's the money quote from Trotsky and the best top-line summary of our argument. Fascism is not merely a system of reprisals, of brutal force, and of police terror. Fascism is a particular governmental system based on the uprooting of all elements of proletarian democracy within bourgeois society.
What does that mean?
Now, I'm also going to argue against the different yet parallel view that everything is fascism, which I would describe as ultra-left. You can see this tweet from before the election last year that describes Kamala Harris and Tim Walz as fascists, in particular for their roles in overseeing the police and in police repression of protests. You see a lot of this type of thing on the left. Depending on who you ask, the US is a fascist state. The US has always been a fascist state. Israel is fascist. The police are fascist. We can all agree that both major parties have moved steadily rightward over the decades and have made state violence and repression, militarized border security, and imperialist war more and more acceptable in the mainstream. But I think if we describe a Democrat like Harris as fascist, then the word has ceased to have any meaning at all. Okay. Okay, so when we say that what's going on now isn't fascism, it really pisses some people off. The argument is that we're pedantic with definitions, that we're more interested in gatekeeping the term than we are in doing something about it. Our critics believe we aren't taking the threat seriously enough. We're just sitting back and yapping instead of taking action. Sometimes identity politics are brought in, like we're privileged to be debating fascism while immigrants are rounded up. Not to be defensive, but this does actually relate to the politics of the discussion. We think these arguments are in bad faith. Firebrand comrades have been in the streets every week since January, and I imagine that's true of y'all and GRS too. And we've been organizing against the police, ICE, and real fascists for years, and some of us for decades. There's another line of argument. People say, what does it matter what we call it? If the word fascism inspires people to get out in the streets, it's a good thing, right? According to this view, using the strongest language to describe Trump is the best way to raise mass awareness of the real danger. But we don't think this is a reason to be imprecise or unclear with our vocabulary. That's a bad habit, and it doesn't.
Okay, so basically what's going on in this presentation is they're having an autistic argument about what the technical definition of fascism is. Okay, I guess let's see how this goes. But I want to be very clear about this. This is obviously a philosophical discussion. So I want everyone to take things with a grain of salt in this presentation, because it seems to me that someone is trying to convince the larger group to change the language that they're already using. And so just because they say something doesn't mean that many other people agree with them. And the only way that we would know if people agreed with them is if they legitimately started changing the language that they're using in the public. So I guess we'll see. But I do think this will be interesting either way. I have a question, though. Why not just use capitalism instead of all the synonyms they use? Or is it not? Do you know the answer to this and you're just asking for newbies? Because I feel like you know the answer to this question and you're just asking for newbies. Please tell me you know the answer to this question and you're just asking for newbies. Rottweiler, did you get hit in the head? The reason they use the different words for capitalism is because they're all different vectors of capitalism. Capitalism is not just one thing. Capitalism is all things. Capitalism is all problems. Therefore, they use different words to identify different vectors of the... See, thank God. I knew you knew the answer to this. I was like, why the fuck is Rottweiler asking this question? You are feeling helpful? Oh, you'd like to know as well? Yeah, you definitely don't know the answer to this. Okay. Everyone's fucking around today to try to make me explain something that I've explained a million times. The reason they use so many words that basically all mean capitalism is they're talking about different aspects of capitalism. So they're attacking capitalism from this angle, this angle, this angle, this angle, this angle, this angle, front ways, back ways, sideways, as many angles as they possibly can. And they use different words to delineate all those different angles. But at their core, they all mean capitalism, basically.
Make for good politics in the long run. Now, of course, we recognize that what's happening now is terrifying and awful, and that people are afraid for a reason. Trump is horrible. There's no question there. There's so many bad things happening all at once, and it's just overwhelming if you have any conscience or human empathy at all. Some of our smarter critics will remind us that fascism arises at times when capitalism is in crisis. And everyone can recognize that we've been in crisis, certainly since the start of the pandemic, but really as far back as the global financial crisis of 2008. We can all see things deteriorating around us. And we also recognize that the fascist movement is indeed growing here in the US and around the world. There are definitely some fascist characteristics of the MAGA movement. There are definitely fascists associated with Trump, and we take Musk's salute very seriously. We believe people when they tell us who they are. All these are valid reasons why the word fascism is on people's lips right now. And I just want to be clear that we wouldn't make these arguments in the wrong setting. We wouldn't go up to someone at a rally who was holding up a sign that called ICE fascists and quote Trotsky at them. No way. That's not how to inspire or organize people. The reason we have these debates and the reason we make these arguments with those who will listen is that remaining clear about what fascism is very important for strategizing against it. We don't just meet people where they're at with theory. Of course, we will stand shoulder to shoulder with anyone protesting Trump, but we don't get loose with definitions just because a lot of other people are right now. We want to uphold our because theory is our best weapon in the struggle. And you can see that in the title of Trotsky's collection of essays, Fascism, What It Is and How to Fight It. Theory and action are given equal emphasis. So yeah, Marxists are pedantic about this for a reason. Most people in the mainstream use the word fascism vaguely or inexactly. If you look up fascism in Wikipedia, you'll see the opening paragraph is just a generic definition of a far-right dictatorship. And that's before you get to the part where they blame Bolshevism for it. Most people accept this definition, this generic definition.
No, the left doesn't care about human trafficking at all. They never talk about human trafficking. They very rarely allude to anything related to it. So no, they don't care about that at all.
Marxists sometimes have more specific definitions of words in general use. We have a more specific or even technical definition of the terms working class and socialism, as you probably know. For similar reasons, we're also more technical about fascism. More importantly, we believe that if you get the definition wrong, it can lead to strategic mistakes in outlook, in assessing what's happening and in organizing. Getting it wrong can lead you astray. That imperative comes out in Trotsky's writing on fascism, and in a situation like what's happening now, it can promote despair and panic. We want to prevent despair and panic, and that's why we're having these debates.
Fair point.
So Trotsky wrote a lot on the topic of fascism.
Exactly.
Along with Clara Zetkin, he was arguably the most important theorist of fascism during the era when it first arose in Europe. The rise of fascism was intimately tied with the disastrous end of the revolutionary period in Europe in the 1920s, and that's why Trotsky paid such close analytical attention to it. This is something Trotsky wrote in a letter to a comrade in the UK in 1931. In order to be capable of foreseeing anything with regard to fascism, it is necessary to have a definition of that idea. What is fascism? What are its base, its form, and its characteristics? How will its development take place? It's necessary to proceed in a scientific and Marxian manner. So you can see that Uncle Leon himself was all about getting it right. So what is fascism? In that same letter, Trotsky said, it is a plebeian movement financed and directed by big capital. The genuine basis is the petty bourgeoisie. By plebeian, he means it's a mass movement, not just something imposed from the top down or installed in a coup, but something that originates in the streets. And the base of the mass movement is the petty bourgeoisie, but as Trotsky points out, some sectors of the proletariat became involved too. To illustrate this, Trotsky makes a distinction between the dictatorship of Miguel Primo de Rivera in Spain from 1920 to 1932 and the dictatorship of the OG fascist Mussolini in Italy. Primo de Rivera was an aristocrat and he had the support of the establishment, including the military. This makes it a much more standard, if no less appalling, state of affairs. Whereas the original fascist movement in Italy was made up of the frustrated petty bourgeoisie. It was a street movement, and that makes a difference. And for example, Trotsky points out that Mussolini had difficulty bringing the traditional military establishment into his project, which was at first driven by street militias and paramilitaries and other thugs. This was true of the Nazis too. A reminder of the definition of petty bourgeoisie. When we Marxists use the term, another one we're very specific about, it means small business owners, middle managers, bureaucrats, doctors, lawyers, priests, and others who don't depend on wage work for a living. They're not the big bourgeoisie, the investor class who runs society, and they're not workers who are dependent on a wage from the investor class. They're the people who either own their own businesses or they do contract work, or their executives paid a high salary to manage other workers. They feel like they create their own wealth through their own hard work and virtue. They tend to be more individualistic, if not outright more conservative than average, than the average worker, and they avoid mass politics during ordinary times. For example, they want nothing to do with unions.
True.
The petty bourgeoisie roughly correlates to middle class. That's not an exact definition because you can earn a higher wage and live in a middle-class neighborhood and still be of the proletariat. But it's okay to use that word loosely. Sometimes we do that, you know. The point is that when the petty bourgeoisie or the middle classes experience crisis and suffer and fear being displaced or pushed into the ranks of the working classes or the poor, that's when they often panic or get angry or lash out at others, whether immigrants or Jews or LGBTQ people.
Or Jews.
And that's when they'll set aside their aversions to organized politics and start to cohere into reactionary movements.
What?
There might be significant numbers of ex-soldiers in their ranks. This was true in Germany, where ex-soldiers who had been through World War I felt abandoned by society. And that can give the movement a militaristic vibe. And I think that does actually pertain to the current situation with lots of ex-soldiers who, you know, have far-right or fascist politics in the US.
So the left doesn't hate Jews. The left has never hated Jews. This is what we call a conservative bullshit talking point. There are a lot of Jews involved in leftist organizing. There are absolutely Jewish groups involved in the campus protest organizing. Jewish Voice for Peace is one of those groups. So they don't hate Jews at all in any way. They think only Nazis hate Jews.
After the endless wars. But in fascism, there's an extra step involved, which is that during a crisis such as the crises of Europe between the wars, such as the crisis in Chile in 1973, the capitalist class identifies this process happening and uses these angry petty bourgeoisie to their advantage and finances and arms them in paramilitaries to do their work, to do their dirty work in repressing the proletariat. At these times, there's revolutionary potential in the workers' movement, as there was in Germany during the revolutions in 1918 and 19, and in Italy during the revolution of 1920, and in Chile in 1973. At this point, big capital fears for its survival. The decision is made that they can no longer rely on ordinary bourgeois democracy, and it becomes necessary for them to arm bands of petty bourgeoisie to smash the workers' movement. What follows is a state of things where capital is still in charge, but there are no more workers' movement and no more democracy. And I'll get to this point in a little while, but I hope that that description of the way it goes down stands in contrast to what we're going through right now. You can see that it's a far more extreme situation. As Trotsky puts it in a 1932 essay, at the moment, the normal police and military resources of the bourgeois dictatorship, together with their parliamentary screens, no longer suffice to hold society in a state of equilibrium. The turn of the fascist regime arrives. Through the fascist agency, capitalism sets in motion the masses of crazed petty bourgeoisie and the bands of declassed and demoralized lumpen proletariat, all the countless human beings whom finance capital itself has brought to desperation and frenzy. I just love Trotsky's writing style. The way he describes this happening in Italy in November of 1920 is the textbook case of a fascist upsurge and takeover. And Trotsky also points out that in this process, the crazed petty bourgeoisie drags sections of frustrated workers with them. Fascism may be initially led by the petty bourgeoisie, but it definitely cuts across class lines, and that's one reason it's so dangerous. Another thing I want to stop and point out is that Trotsky refers to ordinary bourgeois democracy as a dictatorship, the dictatorship of capital over the workers and other classes. That's what we live in and what capitalism has been for centuries.
Wait. Ordinary democracy is a capitalist dictatorship, according to Trotsky. It's almost like they think that the country is built on capitalism. It probably just means revolutionary socialism or revolutionary communism. I wouldn't worry about that too much. It's not a common term that we see. Listen to this.
And Trotsky also points out that in this process, the crazed petty bourgeoisie drags sections of frustrated workers with them. Fascism may be initially led by the petty bourgeoisie, but it definitely cuts across class lines, and that's one reason it's so dangerous. Another thing I want to stop and point out is that Trotsky refers to ordinary bourgeois democracy as a dictatorship, the dictatorship of capital over the workers and other classes. That's what we live in and what capitalism has been for centuries. This is why Marx, Engels, and Lenin called for a dictatorship of the proletariat, the only thing that can bring an end to the dictatorship of capital. The takeaway here is that capital functions like a dictatorship in normal times, even when we're granted limited democratic rights. And this is exactly why you label its more violent, when you label its more violent or repressive traits as fascism, it's an error. And it's one of the primary errors that I'm addressing here. So Trotsky identifies three key traits of a fascist state. In his words, fascism means workers' organizations are annihilated. The proletariat is reduced to an amorphous state. A system of administration is created which penetrates deeply into the masses and which serves to frustrate the independent crystallization of the proletariat. And by system of administration, he means extensive police repression like the Gestapo, of course, but also an expanded bureaucracy. One way the Nazis dealt with unemployment was to hire thousands of new bureaucrats, and this bureaucracy ends up strangling opposition. None of this is even close to being true in the US right now. There are no fascist street armies big enough to smash working class organizations, no fascist bureaucracy powerful enough to do away with democracy completely, nor is that Trump's agenda, as I said, and I'll explain more of that in a bit. So next, I want to make a few distinctions and pull out a few strands because there are overlapping meanings when we use the word fascism. The first thing is to distinguish a fascist state, and I've already discussed what that is, so I'll get right to the next point. The next thing to distinguish is the fascist movement itself, the small but growing minority of people who openly support fascist politics. They may organize with greater or lesser success depending on conditions on the ground, and those conditions have been more favorable for them in the last decade or so. And in this category, there are two subcategories. The first of these is the street movement. Rick Kuhn here in Australia calls them the boot boys. They are familiar to us. In the US, we have the 3%ers and the Proud Boys and so on. And, you know, the Proud Boys avoid the use of the term fascism and avoid Nazi imagery. And this is one way, they're good at marketing, right? Or at least, you know, in their limited way, they're good at marketing. And this is one way they appeal to a lot of frustrated and confused young men.
Oh, okay.
And then on the other hand, the outright fucking neo-Nazis who embrace all that imagery, like this trash who protested at Drag Queen Story Hour in Ohio a couple years ago, and they were opposed by our comrades there.
You know, someone was giving me shit on Twitter the other day because I think I'm actually the first person that used the term woke right. And I used it in early 2021. And when I used the term woke right in early 2021, it was this explicit group that I was using it about. Because this explicit group, the White Lives Matter assholes, were running around riling people up about critical race theory, and they were lying to them about what critical race theory was, and it was actually making people extremely aggressive and violent. And I was getting more threats from these people than I ever did from the left. And so I actually started using the term woke right in 2021 to refer explicitly to the White Lives Matters assholes. Wignats. Exactly. Wignats. And I bring this up because one of James Lindsay's attack dogs yesterday on Twitter was like, Karlyn, have you told them that you were using the term woke right years ago? And I've been like, yeah, I was, but I wasn't talking about Nick Fuentes and the Groypers, and I wasn't talking about made up bullshit about people not being classical liberals. I was literally talking about these people.
And, you know, they're clowns, but they're dangerous clowns. And when they feel comfortable to organize like this, it's something we definitely have to pay attention to. The second subcategory of open fascists are the ones who work in the political sphere and wear suits and ties and are a bit more palatable in the mainstream. They're very much fascist themselves. Prime example of this is the AfD, or Alternative for Germany. Through their campaigns against...
Scott, I literally already said earlier, I don't think this is a term you need to worry about. It's not a term I hear often at all. It probably just means revolutionary socialism. I don't have a better definition for you. So I appreciate the super chat, though. Thank you.
Immigrants and preying on the downwardly mobile middle class's fears about austerity and the Great Replacement and so on. They've really legitimized the same kinds of politics that were practiced by the Nazis. And they've gained a lot of power in certain states in just 10 years since their formation.
Okay. So for the Groypers or right-wing dissidents in the chat, how can we describe a Wignat to people? Because there are people that are watching that don't know what a Wignat is. How can we a white N-word? A white N-word is the best way to so it's like, how can we describe Wignat to people? Help me out here. I know there are dissident right-wingers watching. No, it's not a white nationalist. No, there are plenty of white nationalists that are not Wignats. They are incredibly racist. They are incredibly anti-Semitic. They are incredibly toxic. They're not, no, I would not say white identitarian. Nope, that's not what I would say. There are white identitarians who are not wignats. They are the most disgusting, toxic people on the internet. We don't like them. They're assholes. They're typically not very smart. When I was using that term, there was an explicit group called White Lives Matter. And so White Lives Matter is the actual name of a proper group. They are the most horribly toxic people on the internet. I would not call them toxic white supremacists. No, that's not what I would say. Anyway, if there are dissident right-wingers in the chat that want to give a more specific definition of wignat, I'll put it up on the screen. No one has given a good definition so far. But just know that we don't like them and we don't associate with them and we don't want anything to do with them and they can go fuck themselves. And yeah.
They're quite strong in several state assemblies in Germany, and they're part of a far-right coalition that has a number of seats in the European Parliament too. You know, like, and everyone, as people often joke, like, well, this should end well, you know. They also have strong connections to the street movement, the Boot Boys, and in some towns in Germany, immigrants have to worry about even doing day-to-day things like going to the grocery store. And the AfD are really good at exploiting social media, including TikTok, to appeal to a younger audience. That combination of political power plus a street movement is how fascism happens. I don't think there's anything happening on this kind of scale in the US. MAGA, as it is today, can't really compare. This would be like if the Proud Boys had a political party that was dominant in several state legislatures around the country and had a much bigger street movement at the same time. But this is an international movement, as shown by Elon Musk's open support for AfD and their connections with fascist movements on the ground here in the US. So, you know, this is not to downplay the threat. We have to be wary, okay? The third thing to differentiate is right-wing politicians who are not fascist, but who may lend them tacit support. Donald Trump is a good example of this. Trump certainly has uncomfortable proximity to the far right, perhaps most damningly in his role in the January 6th riot. It's easy to picture someone like Trump approving of and benefiting from a fascist takeover of the government if that were to take place. But we're nowhere near this stage yet, and we at Firebrand think it's incorrect to label him as a fascist. Now, of course, that's going to be a controversial statement for some. But let's make some comparisons. January 6th was a relatively disorganized and ideologically incoherent riot.
True.
Close to a fascist uprising.
True.
In an article at Tempest from last year, Dan Davison and Sasha Martin lay out some of these arguments. They quote historian Richard Evans, who wrote that January 6th bears no comparison to the hundreds of thousands of armed and uniformed stormtroopers and squad.
The far left is getting shockingly aware of things on the right. Like, we saw this on Socialism Saturday, where the left actually understood the right better than the right understood them. Now we're seeing this again with the Denver communists, where they're like, yeah, January 6th was not actually a fascist insurrection. It was just a bunch of idiots that were like LARPing, essentially. So that should actually alarm everyone. If the right is actually, if the far left is actually hinging into reality about what the far right, or what the, not even the far right, about what the right is, that's kind of a scary thing, because I never thought they would actually hinge into reality, and it kind of seems like they are.
That the Nazi and fascist leaders deployed onto the streets daily in the 20s and early 30s to intimidate, beat up, arrest, imprison, and often kill political opponents. So Trump has no real paramilitary movement and no real support from the capitalist class or the military for a fascist takeover. This is a key point. Fascism is a cudgel wielded by the ruling classes when they're desperate, and we're nowhere near that stage yet. They don't want to make a dictator out of Trump. That would really be counter to their goals. There's a more sophisticated argument that goes, okay, this isn't a fascist state yet, but Trump and his minions are trying to make it one. We don't agree. Bourgeois democracy is stable enough for the ruling class right now to keep workers in line and keep extracting profits. Now, of course, it's less stable than it was, but it's stable enough still, okay? Trotsky wrote that the big bourgeoisie likes fascism as little as a man with aching molars likes to have his teeth pulled, something they only want to do in an emergency. So we would argue that we haven't reached some new threshold, but that Trump is merely accelerating the neoliberal policies of recent decades, entrenching the violence and oppression that are built into capitalism.
So true.
As wild and off the chain as he is, he has more in common with Reagan, both George Bush's, and even with his arch nemesis Biden than he does with Hitler. Trump himself is an opportunist.
Holy shit! The communists have become self-aware. Trump has more in common with Reagan than he does with Hitler. Okay.
Grifter who's hijacked the Republican Party and doesn't have a fascist party himself. That's another key thing. Okay. Now, certainly, this is all dangerous enough in and of itself. You don't have to think Trump is a fascist to view him as noxious, corrosive, and dangerous. We don't need to misuse that word to inspire us to organize against him. We oppose him with everything we have. Okay. I'm also not arguing that a future instance of American fascism would resemble German or Italian fascism in a one-to-one way. We don't want to be that wooden in our thinking. And, you know, we are accused of that, but we are, you know, I believe we're refuting that. And we have to be clear in assessing the social forces at work and not give in to panic. That brings me to the fourth and final thing to distinguish, which is the general conditions that signal a dangerous turn to the right in society. The widespread embrace of these ideas and the emergence of an angry, paranoid, sometimes violent petty bourgeoisie. This, I think, is true of the mass movement that supports Trump. We saw more concentrated instances of it in the right-wing protests during COVID lockdown in the US and Canada and here in Australia. Just picking on these chuds here in Australia because I hate them so much. This is an anti-lockdown rally from a few years ago. I don't think it's incorrect to say that this is the human material of fascism. These people aren't as sharply defined as the Proud Boys or the January 6th rioters, but they're the ordinary people who are ready for a broader fascist movement if and when it does coalesce. If you look at the values of the people who embraced fascism in Europe in the 30s and the values of these people today, they're very comparable. They're extreme nationalists, they're anti-immigrant, of course they're racist. The whole concept of the nation and their national identity is tied into their racism. They have a really toxic conception of masculinity and gender. They're ableist, they're homophobic. Obviously, they're rabidly anti-trans. And, you know, the original fascists were too. That's something that's been erased from history. And they have a really gross idea of purity, whether it's racial or gender purity, and a fear of things like, quote unquote, contagion and weakness. You can see that in their talking points on Twitter and stuff. This is why trans folks have been sounding the alarm about how the rhetoric now matches the rhetoric towards Jewish, disabled, and trans folks in Europe 100 years ago. They're also superstitious, they're anti-intellectual, anti-science, anti-vax, and conspiracy-minded. Reading Trotsky on the culture of fascism in 1933, it's so relatable for us when we think of MAGA or QAnon or the way modern day right-wingers are obsessed with like ancient Rome or medieval chivalry.
Haven't heard a good QAnon reference in a while.
And how the 10th century lives alongside the 20th. We agree that this movement has fascist characteristics and is very dangerous. Okay, it's just that we distinguish between these social conditions and imminent fascism. I think it's also important to point out that these people are in the minority no matter what they tell themselves, but we have to keep organizing against them. So one thing we want to separate away from the discussion about fascism is what is bad and has always been bad under capitalism and bourgeois democracy. Police repression has always existed under capitalism. As Lenin pointed out in State and Revolution, it's a feature of the system, not a bug. Racism has always existed under capitalism. Again, a feature required by the system, especially since slavery was definitive for the first few centuries of capitalism. Imperialist war has always existed under capitalism. When you get fuzzy with the definition and start applying it to any instance of fascism, and start applying it to any instance of violence and repression, then the word loses meaning. Is structural racism fascist? Then all of US history is fascist. What's the point of identifying a change in conditions or the threat of the far right if that's the case? There was a book published last year, The Black Anti-Fascist Tradition, which argues this very thing. The history of the US is fascist because white supremacy is in nature fascist. As our comrade Steve...
The argument is that capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership, created slavery. Slavery is what the United States was built on. The idea of private property ownership of people. Private property ownership of people created systemic racism. That is racism that is systematized through laws and policies. You might also hear this called institutional racism. When the left says racism, white supremacy, whiteness, they are referencing systemic or institutional racism, which means the system that upholds racism, the institution that upholds racism, and that institution is capitalism. That's what they mean. Okay, I think we're gonna have to wrap it up there because I do need to take just a tiny break because I need to set up my spy stream. So we got through most of this, and I think we did a pretty good job of it. The reason we're ending early is because, we are going to be starting a spy stream in about 15 minutes. And this stream, we are going to go inside a live leftist training and talk about it. I do need to end the current stream that we're on. I'm going to start a new stream. This is going to be a public spy stream. I don't do public spy streams all the time. So this is going to be a nice treat for people who aren't supporters. You're going to get to go inside a live leftist training with us. So what we're going to do is I'm going to end this stream. We're going to take a little bit of a break. I'm going to set up the other stream. We're going to get started over there. And then we are going to go and watch this call, which is the National Education Association, the largest teachers union in the country, openly organizing to try to get people on the right to join them in their fight against Trump. So that's what we're watching tonight. That starts at 8 p.m. I'll start the stream a little earlier. We'll get all situated. So I need everyone, go take a bathroom break, go get a snack, go get a drink, make sure you are subscribed to my channel and all that stuff. And I'm going to end this stream, and then we're going to come back on the other stream, and we're going to see what the left has to say. And thank you guys for joining me. If you can't make it, the stream will always be on demand later, of course. And if you appreciate what I do, I stream every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We do Socialism Saturday on Saturdays at 6 p.m. And I'll be back with you in a couple minutes. Take care, guys. We will. See you soon. Bye.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
is it you're trying to do with your life?
Play the piano for the people.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.